What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. It's your boy Shane G. We are here once again with Politics as Usual on the Ethos Media Network. So please, of course, make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe for all of the latest content. Now, to start the new year, I did an interview at the very end of 2023 with James Fauntleroy of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, formerly known as Fred Hampton Leftist. So shout out to my man James. Make sure you follow him at JB Font on everything. But we had one particular part of the conversation that seemed to bother a lot of people, and I knew it would. I knew it was going to when I brought it up and when I put the clip out. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and it was predictable. So, what I said in that clip was when white people hear the term white privilege, they equate it with money, which is why they get offended at the term. And if you look at all of the comments in the reel, it's just simply called white privilege with JB Font. You can look at that reel and you can see about 70 comments or so that the vast majority of them essentially echo that exact same sentiment. They all say, I was poor. Where was my privilege at? I was, I didn't grow up rich, or I work 9 to 5 and I'm check to check. Where's my privilege? I'm 60 and I'm still waiting on mine. Where's my privilege at? I understand, which is why I started that off by saying most of you being white people in this case, equate privilege with money. That's why I started off my statement with that, because that is oftentimes not what we're talking about. When we say white privilege, we're not talking about white people having it easy. That's not what that means. That doesn't mean that you're not going to struggle. That doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge your struggle or that we go through similar struggles. That's just not what any of that means. I have a lot of close white friends who grew up very similar to how I did financially. So it's not necessarily a money thing. And what I hope to get across today is what we actually mean when we speak about white privilege. Or if you don't like the term white privilege, we'll call it black detriment. I don't know what you want to call it. We'll make it more about black people than white people, I guess. But I think either way, the statement stands. I don't know what to call it other than white privilege, because I think hopefully if you are objective about this and you're not just looking to lash out and personalize what I'm saying, because I think that's what a lot of people did on that last video too. They were calling me racist and saying that we were that, which is crazy. Like, you know what I mean? If you know me for sure, you know that that's couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. But when I speak on certain issues like this, it does tend to upset people. So I'm hoping that I can illustrate my point in a way that you can receive and that you can acknowledge is not faulty. And again, don't personalize it. I'm not talking about micro issues. I'm talking about macro issues. I'm talking about what affects the majority of each group, not individuals, not you who grew up poor and only lived around other white people. So white privilege didn't really come into play because it was all white people around you. So then it became more of a class thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you look at the entirety of the country, how are most black people treated versus how most white people are treated. That's what I'm talking about. So again, hopefully I can illustrate that point here. Of course, I have documentation, I have articles, I have all of that stuff. So let's get to it. Now, the first thing I want to show you guys is a video, because I want to take it. I don't want to go all the way back to slave days and how that affects everything now, which it does, but that's a different conversation. I want to talk about strictly modern era, how white privilege still applies. That's what I want to talk about today. So with that, we're going to start with this video from Vox. It's a quick video, and then we'll go over some of these articles. So I just want to make sure that we are set up properly here. Now I'll go back to this. Yeah, I can be small for this one because the video is important. So I need y'all to, check this out.
Look at these 4 kids. These preschool teachers watched a video of them playing for a 2016 study. The study asked them to press the enter key every time they saw a behavior that could become a potential challenge. But the thing about the study is it's kind of deceptive. There's actually no misbehavior in the video. The kids are actors, and the researchers were using eye tracking software because what they really wanted to know was when teachers expect misbehavior, who are they watching? The study found that both white and black teachers spent more time gazing at black boys than other children. Black boys make up less than a quarter of the nation's preschoolers, but more than 40% of preschool suspensions. The study's lead researcher told the Washington Post that implicit biases don't begin with black men and police. They begin with black preschoolers and their teachers, if not earlier.
Okay. So what that says to me, now you tell me if you read anything different out of this, but what that says to me is essentially black boys specifically are targets of people assuming that they're going to do the wrong thing before they even do the wrong thing. They were checking for misbehavior for all four of the students, but yet every teacher kept focusing on the black boys. What do you think psychologically that does to a very young black kid who, as they just said in the statistics, over 40% of suspensions, or over 44% of suspensions, but less than 10% of the total preschool population. And that's also reflected in prison numbers. So it starts then. It starts when kids are 4, 5, 6 years old, being treated differently based on the color of their skin, based on an implicit bias that these teachers have that they assume the black kid is going to do something out of line before anybody else. So it starts then, and then it continues into stuff like this. Are Emily and Greg more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal? A field experiment on labor market discrimination. Now, I want to talk about this because a lot of people seem to sort of have it in their minds that, because recently it came to my attention that the average income for white households is over $100,000, whereas the average for black households is way less than that, right? And so a lot of people will say, well, black people don't have their priorities together. Black people are too worried about going to the club instead of saving money for rent or buying rims and stuff. Rims aren't even a style anymore, but people say this type of stuff. You know what I mean? They just act like black people's priorities are just fucked up, and that's why we're in the position we're in. Well, this shows differently. So are Emily and Greg more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal? So basically what they did for this study, and you can read the whole thing. This is on Georgia Tech's website. So this is a study done by some Georgia Tech professors. You can read the study yourself. But essentially what they're saying is that the resumes can be identical. But if your name is Jamal Smith versus, Greg Hill, or something like that, Greg Austin, a traditionally white sounding name, even if the resumes are the exact same, the white names get 50% more callbacks. Now, I'm not going to read this entire study. I am going to read the beginning and the takeaway, the conclusion, and you can read the full study for yourself. We study race in the labor market by sending fictitious resumes to help wanted ads in Boston and Chicago newspapers. To manipulate their perceived race, resumes are randomly assigned African American or white sounding names. White names received 50% more callbacks for interviews. Callbacks are also more responsive to resume quality for white names than for African American ones. The racial gap is uniform across occupation, industry, and employer size. So what that means is no matter what the job is that you're going for, no matter what industry it's in, and no matter how big the company is, it's still the exact same. White names get 50% more callbacks with an identical resume. Differential treatment by race still appears to be prominent in the U.S. labor market. And this study was done, I'm sure the year will be on here at the end. Let's see. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and show. Oh, okay, this is the early 2000s. But this paper suggests that African Americans face differential treatment when searching for jobs, and this may still factor into why they do poorly in the labor market. Job applicants with African American names get far fewer callbacks for each resume they send out. Equally important, applicants with African American names find it hard to overcome this hurdle in callbacks by improving their observable skills or credentials. So if you can't get a job, it's the experience argument. If you can't get a job, how can you get the experience to get a better job? Or if you require 5 years of experience, how am I supposed to get that if I can't get the job to get the experience? That it's that thing. So basically what they're saying is because it's difficult as it is for black people to get jobs in comparison to their white counterparts, then it limits the skill set that they're able to obtain in order to get a better job in the future, or to get a promotion, or, you know, what have you. So taken at face value, our results on differential returns to skill have possibly important policy implications. They suggest that training programs alone may not be enough to alleviate the racial gap in labor market outcomes. For training to work, some general equilibrium force outside the context of our experiment will have to be at play. In fact, if African Americans recognize how employers reward their skills, they may rationally be less willing than whites to even participate in these programs. So I hope all that's clear. Essentially, the argument that they're making is identical resumes, black name, white name. The white name, or the perceived white name, gets 50% more callbacks than the perceived black names, even if the resumes are the same. And then that obviously trickles into the future of how that affects, you know, your job prospects going forward, your experience level, you know, ultimately, you know, the salary that you can get, you know, because the more experience you have in any given field, in all likelihood, the more money you'll make in that field. So I didn't make that up. That's, you know, again, this is on Georgia Tech's website. Please go look at it yourself. Somebody else in the comments actually mentioned, they didn't say the words affirmative action, but they were hinting at it. They said something about Vivek saying that essentially black people actually have advantages, not white, white privilege doesn't exist. And if anything, minorities have privilege because of quote unquote policies that were put in place to help us get jobs. Okay, well, first of all, affirmative action's done. That doesn't exist anymore. Number two, is what about this right here? A black woman says Target rejected her for a job until she applied as Tory under a different race. She sued Target and won this, by the way. This was in 2022. Okay? This is 2022. This isn't 2000 like that last study I just read was, you know, this isn't a long time ago. This is 2 years ago. Let's read. So, 2 years ago, after being rejected from a job at Target multiple times over the past few years, Naturi Green decided to try a different approach. She joked to her boyfriend, who had also been denied, that if they changed their names and their race on the applications, they would have gotten the job. To test her theory, Green, a black woman from Charlotte, North Carolina, changed her name to Tori and listed her ethnicity as mixed race. After multiple rejections as Naturi, Target offered Tori a job interview. I'm not sure how it can be proved to be discrimination, Green told The Insider, but as a person of color in America, I can't help but think that's the reason. Green posted her story on TikTok where, as of July 20th, it had been viewed nearly 264,000 times. She showed Insider screenshots of her application forms from May 18th and July 3rd of 2022, the first using Naturi, which was rejected, and the second Tori, which was accepted. After looking into this claim, we found that the two applications were filed several weeks apart, and the store was not hiring at the time the application was rejected, Target spokesperson Brian Harper Tabaldo told Insider. According to the reference on the email exchange Green showed Insider, there was a live job listing for a guest advocate. There was also no mention of the store not hiring in the rejection email Green received. Target did not respond to a request for comment on why the job was posted online if the company wasn't hiring at the time. Green told Insider the job she applied for was present in the search jobs section of the website. It's hard to believe that the store was not hiring at the time if the position was still available to apply for on the website. Target has been sued multiple times for allegedly discriminatory hiring practices. Target has previously faced multiple claims of discriminatory hiring practices, which have resulted in legal settlements and vows to change their hiring procedures. More than 20 years ago, Kalisha White, who is black, suspected her application for a job at a Target in Wisconsin was being ignored because of her race. She sent in another one under another name, Sarah Bruckner, and scored an interview, even though the fake resume was less credentialed than her real one. So think about that. This black lady sent in an application to work for Target. All right. She sent in an application to work for Target. They rejected it. She takes some of the credentials off of her resume and changes her name and gets the interview. So the more qualified black person couldn't get the job, but the less qualified white person could, even though it's the same person. She was playing a trick on them. Let's continue. Make myself small. There we go. Let's continue. The Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, a federal agency that enforces civil rights laws involving hiring practices, sued Target on behalf of white and 3 other black job applicants, resulting in a $510,000 settlement. In 2015, Target also paid a $2.8 million fee and agreed to change its job applicant tracking system after the EEOC found it was screening applicants based on race and sex. Then just a few years later, it paid a $3.74 million lawsuit to settle claims that its background criminal checks discriminated against thousands of black and Latino applicants. Target has maintained in the settlements that it had not committed any wrongdoing, but said it would review its screening and hiring practices. There's a penalty for job applicants with black-sounding names. Studies have shown, and I showed you one of them a second ago, studies have shown that despite a recent boom in diversity initiatives, job applicants with black-sounding names are less likely to hear back from employers. Researchers from the University of California, so the first one we read was Georgia Tech. This one's from University of California. The researchers from the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Chicago, so 2 other places that are not Georgia Tech, recently found that after sending 83,000 fictitious job applications to more than 100 Fortune 500 companies, half with traditionally white-sounding names and the other half with distinctively black-sounding names, applicants with black names were contacted 10% fewer times. So, okay, that's better than 50%. Still a lot less. Why? If everything's the same and there's no racism and white privilege doesn't exist. What's that? I don't even think we need to read the rest of this, but this is from the Business Insider if you want to check it out yourself. We're going to move on to so I think I've, again, if you're thinking rationally about this and you're looking at this objectively and you're not making it personal and you're not taking it as a personal attack whenever you hear the word white privilege, if you're not doing those things, right? I think that's a good explanation of the financial disparity that black people complain about in America and why we don't have access to capital. This is what Ice Cube was talking about with Tucker Carlson. This is the issue. This is a big issue. You know what I'm saying? So to act like this doesn't exist and to not call it for what it is, which is preferential treatment of white people over black people, which is white privilege. That is what white privilege is. It's preferential treatment of white people versus black people. That's what it is. So I think financially, I've just proven that. You know what I'm saying? I showed at the very beginning how we're targeted as literal children from the time we're in kindergarten. They expect us to fuck up. When you treat somebody like they're a fuck up their whole life, what happens? Some people will do everything they can to prove you wrong. Other people are going to say, well, if this is who I am and this is what's been put on me, then this is what it is and this is who I am. And they're going to take that role when they otherwise maybe wouldn't have. These are the things that we're talking about. We're not talking about white people who are poor not having financial privilege. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if you, poor white person, and black poor person who live next door to each other apply at the same job with the same resume, you're going to get the call back. In most recent studies, at least 10% more of the time. In older studies, up to 50% more of the time. So I don't know what else to call that. You tell me what to call that. Okay. We're going to move on. So again, keep in mind that video that I played for you at the very beginning, because now we're going to talk about the law, because this is another thing that a lot of people who don't believe in white privilege like to bring up. A lot of them will say, well, if you just don't commit so many crimes, then more of you wouldn't be in jail. Okay, well, again, I already showed you how we're sort of groomed for that from the very beginning. But now I want to show the racial disparity in death penalty cases, because white privilege doesn't exist. So black people have been overrepresented on death rows across the United States, and killers of black people are less likely to face the death penalty than people who kill white people, a new report found. The report from the Death Penalty Information Center is a history lesson in how lynchings and executions have been used in America, excuse me, and how discrimination bleeds into our entire criminal justice system. It traces a line from lynchings of old, killings outside the law, where black people were killed in an effort to assert social control during slavery and Jim Crow, and how that eventually translated into state-ordered executions. Also, just really quick, this is, I don't even have the report up here. Let me pull it up. My bad. There we go. Ignore the feed over here unless you into that kind of thing. But so, okay, yeah, there's everything I just read. This is from the AP. So, the Associated Press. So I also want to mention briefly, I know I said I wasn't really going to talk too much about slavery, but I believe that it is going to come up in this article. So I'll just go ahead and, throw this out there. Look this up. Slave patrols are what turned into our modern day police. The people that, the slave catchers, the people that were riding the horses trying to make sure that slaves didn't escape and would bring them back to Massa in the event that they caught them trying to flee, and would make sure that they got punished by getting whipped and beaten and raped and all that. Yeah. Those are the people that turned into the police of today. Obviously not the exact people, but the institution morphed into what we call the police today. So look that up too. But this comes as the U.S. grapples with criminal justice and police reform following George Floyd's death and the deaths of other black people at the hands of police and in the wake of mass protests. Across the country, 30 states have the death penalty, but executions occur mostly in southern states. This is written in 2020, by the way. We can really skip a lot of this part. Let's see. I think what the data tells us and what history tells us, they're all part of the same phenomenon. The death penalty is inextricably linked to our history of slavery, of lynching, Jim Crow segregation, and we wanted to put what's happening today in appropriate context. That's from Robert Dunham. He leads the Death Penalty Information Center. So this is the part that's really important, though, because white privilege doesn't exist. The report found that throughout the modern era, people of color have been overrepresented on death row. In 2019, 52% of the death row inmates were black. The number has dropped to 42% this year, when approximately 60% of the population is white. 60% of America is white. 42% of death row inmates are black. And we're like 12 to 15% of the population. It also showed that killers of white people were more likely than killers of black people to face the death penalty, and cases with white victims were more likely to be investigated. So let's stop there. What that means is if you kill somebody black, first of all, it might not even get investigated. And second of all, if you do kill somebody black, you're probably not going to get the death penalty. Versus me, I kill somebody who's white. First of all, it's definitely getting investigated, or way more likely. And secondly, they will put me on death row for the exact same crime. What do you call that? Since the death penalty resumed in 1977, 295 black defendants were executed for killing a white victim, but only 21 white defendants were executed for the killing of a black victim, even though black people are disproportionately the victims of crime. Why? Why would that be the case? If white privilege doesn't exist, why would that be the case? This is what I need to know. These are numbers and statistics that are done in studies. Multiple studies have shown all the same thing. I have one more. But what do you call this is my question. Because I'm telling you that it's not based on black people doing more crime. Because when you compare the crimes of black people and white people are still punished harsher. Why? What do you call that? Last slide. This is from Pew. The large growth of the United States criminal legal system in the late 20th century brought a widening racial gap in incarceration. By the year 2000, black people made up almost half of the state prison population, while only being about 13% of the U.S. population. And although a wave of changes to sentencing and correction policies over the past 2 decades has helped lessen disparities in federal and state prisons, black adults were still in prison in 2020 at 5 times the rate of white adults. Okay. The findings from the three, well, actually, no, I do have to read this one part so you guys know who it's coming from. So, the lack of detailed and timely data on who's in jail for how long and why led the Pew Charitable Trust to partner with the Jail Data Initiative, an up-to-date source of data from approximately 1,300 of the nation's nearly 3,000 jails created by the New York University Public Safety Lab and the Data Collaborative for Justice, so at John Jay College. So they're DCJ. So the Data Collaborative for Justice is DCJ. Okay. The findings from 3 counties in the DCJ study reflect similar admissions and length of stay disparities broadly and across several metrics. In 2019, in all 3 counties, let's look at the counties. Durham, North Carolina, which is Lewis and Jefferson County. Oh, no, Durham, North Carolina, Louisville, Jefferson County in Kentucky, and then St. Louis, Missouri. Okay. So those are the 3 places. So in 2019, in all 3 counties, black people were admitted to jail at a rate of at least double and up to 6 times that of white or Hispanic people and spent up to 12 days longer in jail than white people. Black people were admitted to jail at a higher rate than other groups for both misdemeanors and felonies in all 3 counties and typically spent the most time in jail for felonies. Racial disparities in admissions to jail and length of stay were largest among younger adults. So if you're a young black person, you're way more likely to get a much more harsh sentence than a younger white counterpart of yours. Black men and black women both had considerably higher admission rates than their white or Hispanic counterparts, but the length of stay gap was greater among men than women. So they're locking us men up longer. There you go. Black people were overrepresented in most jails with relevant data. So look, this is on Pew. You can look this up yourself as well. Here's my thing, guys. Again, I'm not saying white people don't struggle. I'm not saying white people have it easy. I'm not saying that there aren't challenges that you face every day that may be similar to those of, Black or Hispanic or Arabic people. I'm not saying none of that. What I am saying is there is a difference in the way black people as a whole in America versus white people as a whole in America are treated. Again, in your specific neighborhood, maybe it's not like that. Cool, good for you. That's good. That's a good thing if it's not like that where you live. But just because you haven't seen it in person doesn't mean it's not real. All these people who have been complaining for years and years and years about the way that people are treated in America, black people are treated in America, you really think we're all just bitching for no reason? Or do you think that maybe there's some merit to it? How would you feel? How would you feel if you were constantly bringing up an issue at work, at your job? You were constantly going to your boss like, yo, I'm always having to do all of Sally's work for her. She don't never do shit. I'm always having to do all of her work for her to make sure that the team's goals are met. And I've been complaining about this for 6 months and nobody said anything. Nobody's doing anything about this. And I've proven to you, I caught it on video that she's lollygagging while I'm over here working. What if that was your situation and your boss just said, stop complaining, man. You're making that up. You're making that up. What if that was the situation? Or if she just, or if they just said, well, Sally, has has problems too. So what you're saying is not relevant. Because when you say stuff like that, when you say white privilege doesn't exist because I am not rich, I being a random white commenter on my, you know what I mean? I just want to know what you guys call all of those things that I just laid out for you. So, you know, I've eliminated the whole black people commit more crime argument, so that's why they're treated worse. I've eliminated that argument because, for one, kindergartners can't commit crimes, so why are they being discriminated against? Two, when there's cases of the same crime being committed, the black people get worse punishments. Why? When a white person is killed by a black person, the black person is way more likely to get a death sentence than if a white person kills a black person. Why? I just want you all to tell me what that is if it's not white privilege. I guess it's just the black disadvantage. This is Shane G. This is Politics as Usual right here on the Ethos Media Network. Please, I would love to have one of you who commented on my video on the show to debate the merits of what I'm saying. Because maybe you have some other studies that I haven't seen that show the opposite, or show that everyone is exactly treated the same no matter what, no matter where you're at. And it's purely based on, because I saw a lot of people saying that too. Like, if you're white and poor, you're a lot more likely to get pulled over as well. Yeah. If you are surrounded probably by nothing but other white people, sure, that's the case. Because the police got to pick on somebody. So yeah, they'll pick on the poor versus, you know, the powerful. And yeah, of course that makes sense. But like, in a diverse area, you know, you'd have to show me. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to say it's not true. I'm going to say you'd have to show me. I presented my evidence and where I'm getting my information from. This isn't just a feeling I have based on shit that's happened to me. This is macro studies across the country in multiple different regions. I showed you a Georgia Tech study. I showed you a Chicago study. I showed you a California study. I showed you the 3 different counties of the jail disparities, the death penalty disparities. I've showed you all of that. And this is based on the same behavior, not anything that black people are doing any different than white people. This is all based on the same behavior. So again, come on the show if you think I'm wrong. I would love to have a discussion. I don't want to argue with anybody. I don't want to, you know what I mean? I don't want to do none of that. I just want to have a discussion, and, you know, maybe you can teach me something. You know what I'm saying? I've changed positions on things in the past based on new information. I'm willing to do that still, but you can't ignore what I just put out there. So that's it, y'all. Shane G, Ethos Media Network, Politics as Usual. Make sure you tune in every week. I'm going to have a new episode for y'all. And that's all I got for y'all today, man. I hope y'all have a wonderful beginning to 2024. I hope it's prosperous, peaceful, and plentiful. You know what I mean? That's what I want for everybody out there. Now, again, we know the system, so unfortunately, that's probably not likely, but I hope it happens to you. You know what I'm saying? I hope that good things happen for you this year. And I hope that society can just come to more of an understanding, and we can all, you know, learn from each other and you know, hopefully heal as a country, man, because it's rough out here right now. It's rough for everybody. So that's all I got for y'all today, though. Peace. Next week.